Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and obviously I'm down in the studio again. This will probably be ready in half hour. This I'll probably run for close to an hour. These are things that need to be cleaned. This needs to go away. I always have a collection of, we reuse our plastic containers until they get too ragged and break. So yeah, we're always reusing something. I have a pile of fibulas here that need to be polished. They have gotten slightly tarnished. They're just not as shiny as I want them to be, so they need to be washed. I can actually throw them in with this because that'll be pretty easy to sort when it's time to sort those out in the house. And then those will be bagged up once they're completely dry. Once they're polished here, they'll be rinsed in clean water, which is distilled water. That way we don't get any effects from the local water sources here. Then they go into the vibratory tumbler. Now this vibratory tumbler is a dryer. In fact, we call it the dryer. That is corn cob, ground up corn cob. And what that does is it will slightly polish the surface, but mostly it just dries it. So you don't wind up with any water spots. Because you can have a beautiful piece, but then it's got water spots on it, so it doesn't look as nice as it could. So that takes away the water spot problem. And then I will put them into a container like this, which is what Jack's dog food comes in. And take them up to the house and leave the lid off the container for at least a few hours. And that will make sure that it is bone dry before it is put into a Ziploc bag and stuck into the backstock containers to be ready for when they're needed to be unloaded at the event. So this is actually more concentrated than it needs to be. So I will probably dilute this a little bit. I was a little short on water when I was making the first batch. It's not really a terrible thing when I'm working with the really dirty stuff, but you're going to see that this one over here that's not super dirty is going to make lots of soap suds, which can get actually kind of a pain in the behind. But the one with the extra dirty stuff, it's not going to produce much in the way of soap because this is actually a type of soap sort of a thing. Because the dirt will kill it. It's kind of like dirt in a swimming pool killing the chlorine. You know, it uses it up. So, okay, I am going to go back to work over here, cutting off pieces. Grr. Okay. Sometimes these things that are packed tightly are hard to cut apart. And it's hard to grab this with the vise. There we go. And I have to be extra careful with a saw because I don't want to leave saw marks, whoops, on the neighboring buttons or lose buttons by having them skitter across the floor. You'll see me put my hand here sometimes. And what I'm doing is I'm letting the saw blade run across the flat of my knuckle the same way as you would let a knife run across the flat of your knuckle. The cutting edge is nowhere near my finger, but it completely controls the location of the saw blade for when I start cutting. It's the classic. You just have to get in there, and once you've got in there, then you can get in there for real and cut well. One more button. Buttons, buttons, who's got the buttons? See, this one I couldn't really get in there without damaging the neighboring buttons. That's done. Oops. Don't want to throw that in there. Okay, I only have 3 pieces, 3 flasks worth of stuff to cut off now. Let's try the other sprue cutter, because these are small sprues. That looks good. Yay. I'm very low on some things and out of others, so it's exciting when I can at least build up the stock. I have to really crank when I get back to be ready for Christmas. So I will be doing a lot of, ouch, slightly skinned knuckles. I will be doing a lot of casting when I get back home. I have several custom pieces to make. And I have to do a little research too, because I'm getting some interest in Greek jewelry. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about Greek jewelry. I mean, I know a fair amount about Roman jewelry. And I also know that the Romans copied a huge amount of stuff from the Greeks. It was kind of like their idols. I mean, like they idolized the Greeks. They were like, they considered them to be the peak of civilization and blah, 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 blah. So they liked to copy stuff from them. But I know that's definitely true in terms of sculpture. But I have done less research in terms of jewelry. So I actually need to spend some time doing that. I've got quite a few books on Roman stuff, but I think I'm going to be online for some of the Greek stuff. I have to find some good sources, which are hopefully in English. Just puts a whole nother level of confusion in there when I'm dealing with foreign languages. Just makes it harder. It's not impossible. I work with the Swedish National Museum resource database all the time. But I speak German, so Swedish is close enough that it's not hard to mangle my way through. Not convinced on some of these being perfect. They may be good enough, but they may not be perfect. I prefer perfect. These are Valkyries that I'm chopping off of here. And these cannot be ground on the big wheel. They have to be ground on the small wheel that I pointed out. You need to kind of be able to get in the nooks and crannies without taking off her feet or some other part of the decorations. There we go. Yay. Whoops. That bounced right out of there. Bong. There we go. Okay, now I have this. And that. I'm going to leave the buttons till after lunch. I'm going to cut this off now. This is some Anglo-Saxon girdle hangers. Remember, those are the equivalent of wedding rings for Anglo-Saxon women. Then I've got a bunch of bits and pieces. Some of these did not cast completely. These are bodkins. And bodkins are essentially long needles that are used for lacing gowns. So the ones that didn't that didn't cast completely, I'm just going to get out of the way. That's the first time that particular thing has ever been cast, and I had some issues with the flask, so it's not shocking that I didn't get many, but I did get a couple. I'm still working on another way of making these, and I'm hoping to be able to do that this fall. Oop, I missed a riser around there. It's not the end of the world if I miss a riser, but I try not to have to grind off too much. It wears out the belts. So it's better to cut off things like that and be able to reuse that metal than to wear out the belts. The only thing I have left to do now is the buttons. So I'm going to leave them for now. These look really good, by the way. Very pleased with them. And it is lunchtime. So I'm going to go get some lunch. I will check the tumblers before I go up. In this case, this water is reusable because it's not that dirty, because this metal was not that dirty. And then I have to pick through this. Everything gets a rinse in distilled water. Remember, this is jewelry that came out of the stock that's in my shop that had gotten tarnished from hanging around. The event we do in Pennsylvania is in coal country, and the problem with coal country is there's a high level of natural sulfur in the air. So it tarnishes all your jewelry very quickly. Like, whereas, you know, at home, it'll take months for something to tarnish. There, it can take days. So I frequently wind up washing the back stock that's been out in the trays, at least. Because I want them to go to the next event nice and shiny. Because people like to think their jewelry is brand new and shiny, which it is, of course, but it does tarnish by itself over time. But it's nice if they get it shiny. While I am eating lunch, this will polish. Now, if you remember, we said this is distilled water. This vibratory tumbler doesn't throw things around, but there are some stainless steel balls in here that are used for polishing. I'm going to drag those out of there so they can be used. Also going to look through the bottom to make sure I haven't left any pieces in there. Sometimes like the water in here is not perfectly clean now. I need to actually change it. So I am going to leave that for at least a half an hour. And that process will dry those so there's no water spots on them. These will continue to polish. They're I may have to see if they haven't made any good progress by the time I get back. I may throw them into the vibratory tumbler with slightly more aggressive grit. This will be ready when I get done from lunch. These are pieces of metal that have been, they used to be sprues that have been repolished. I'm going to put them over here. I have a little stash over here where they stay until they get used. So, off to lunch.